something about everything that I was afraid of in Guatemala. I think you're gonna hear the pages turning. People say that I must be brave to travel by myself. No, I am not brave. I am the biggest coward you ever met. I'm afraid of everything.
Oh my god. Alright, fine.
I don't like it. Hopefully I won't get sick, but I ate here last time and I was very scared and then nothing happened.
Okay.
So.
You're prepared.
Wow. What if we were like starving in the forest and we came across that? Every single time before I go on a trip, I get cold feet. I can't sleep at night for days, and I always think about canceling my ticket or at least changing the date. This time was the worst. Mom read somewhere that Guatemala is one of the most dangerous places in the world. She begged me not to go. The day before my flight, she offered to buy me a ticket to Colombia instead. If you get kidnapped, we won't be able to rescue you, she said. She told me a story about someone's friend who traveled to Central America and was never heard from again. Their body was found on the beach, cut up into pieces, Mom said. She was starting to freak me out. The U.S. Embassy didn't help much either. They said that no area of Guatemala City is safe. Not even the area around the airport. The Lonely Planet guide said that every month a bus falls off a cliff in Guatemala. I was reconsidering the whole trip, and only my brother, who had actually been to Guatemala, said to me, "Yes, definitely go. Guatemala is beautiful." "You don't think I'll get killed?" I pressed him. "Highly unlikely," he replied. And that was that. I decided to go. But I was very afraid. First of all, I was afraid of my plane crashing. One day I will for sure die from a heart attack in the air caused by my fear of flying. The Guatemala City airport is one of the scariest airports I have ever landed in. Guatemala City is at elevation, which means that it's surrounded by mountains, which means that I was sure our plane was about to fly into the side of a mountain, and that would be it. Meanwhile, my friend Bob was taking video on his cell phone, which is why we have this video. I could not take any video at that time as I was busy praying and imagining what death feels like when your airplane hits a mountain. Miraculously, we didn't crash, and after failing to take money out of an ATM, we got into a taxi heading directly to Antigua. This was the first time in my life that I completely bypassed the capital city that I flew into, all because the U.S. Embassy said that no part of the city is safe. Come to think of it, strange how millions of people live there and they're still alive. On the way to Antigua, I was very sleepy, but every now and then I opened my eyes to check if we were about to fall off a cliff. Instead, we got stuck in traffic and moved along at a snail's pace. After I fell asleep and woke up a few times, we finally arrived in Antigua. It turned out that our Airbnb was in a gated community behind a tall fence, and that the apartment was guarded by 2 scary dogs, and there were metal bars on every window. It felt pretty safe. But on our second night in Antigua, there was an earthquake. I know that it happened on the second day because we had spent the afternoon sightseeing the destroyed churches and monasteries from the great earthquake of 1773, the one that completely destroyed this beautiful Spanish colonial capital. Suddenly, around 1 or 2 in the morning, I was lying in bed but not yet asleep. The whole room leaned to one side and then another. I jumped off the bed, ran out of the bedroom, yelled at Bob to come down from his upstairs bed. My heart was pounding. I was terrified. Bob seemed to have found the whole experience amusing. He had never been in an earthquake before. I did not find it amusing. I wondered if there'd be aftershocks and if it was even safe to remain inside the house. I went outside into the street to survey the scene, but no one had run out of their houses except for me. Only the dogs were barking all at once everywhere. We read later that a couple of people had died from heart attacks during the shaking, and also that there was a landslide on the road between Guatemala City and Antigua, the road that we drove on just the day before. After this happened, I became scared of earthquakes and was always under the impression that something was about to start shaking. But whether it was real or imaginary, I couldn't say, because there are always tremors in Antigua. I was also super scared of getting sick. That's because the last time after I traveled to Cambodia, I picked up 3 parasites, which took a long time to get rid of, and destroyed my ability to digest lactose. And I'm not touching it with my hands because I'm on a mission not to get sick during this trip. I thought if I eat only the food that is packaged in plastic, like potato chips and chocolate bars, then I could avoid diarrhea. Nope. The first night we went out to eat, I drank a glass of refreshing Jamaica juice and spent the next few days on the toilet. Never mind that. Let's talk about our trip to Lake Atitlán, which is considered one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. It is now also an interesting lake because they found an ancient Mayan city drowned below its surface. So we took a minibus from Antigua to the town of Panachatel, which is on the banks of the lake. The entire time in the minibus, I was worried about 2 things. Number 1, that I would get diarrhea on a bus that had no toilet, and number 2, that we would fall off a cliff. No, sorry, 3 things were worrying me. That we wouldn't make it to the lake before nightfall. Lonely Planet said that it wasn't safe to travel on roads in Guatemala at night. Our driver seemed to share this opinion, for he raced to his destination hoping to outpace the sun that was retiring for the night on the western side of the sky. Actually, the road between Antigua and Panachatel is exactly the kind of road where buses fall off cliffs. It is also a most beautiful road, but it snakes around mountains, and impatient drivers race along as if their passengers are immortal and pass slow-moving vehicles by moving into the opposite lane, even when it is impossible to know if anyone is coming at them from behind the curve. There's also a ditch along the side of the road. I guess it's there for drainage, but we saw a minivan stuck with its wheels at a 30-degree angle in this ditch, and all the bewildered passengers crowding on the side of the road. Anyway, somehow we made it to Panachatel, and the next task was to find our Airbnb. All the normal people got hotel rooms in town, but for whatever reason, I rented a private home that looked very beautiful in the photos and had good reviews, but the directions that we were given said, and I quote, "Turn right into an onion field, and you will find the keys under the tail of the frog on the porch. I will ask the cleaning lady to leave the lights on for you," the landlord added. I didn't understand the significance of this statement until our taxi took us into pitch blackness along a bumpy dirt road, and I couldn't even see if onions were growing on the side of it or if we were on an entirely different road going somewhere else. We did find a giant wooden frog on the porch, and under its tail the key. We seem to have gotten a great deal on this comfortable 2-bedroom home, with clean towels and crispy bed sheets and warm water in the shower, and beautiful paintings on the walls depicting Mayan people on market days. But I was scared because there were no guard dogs, no bars on the windows, no fence, and no one for hundreds of meters from us. In case someone broke in, I wouldn't even know how to call the police. We considered going to sleep with a knife under our pillow. The next morning I awoke in my comfortable bed feeling perfectly refreshed. By then, Bob, my friend who was traveling with me, had already saved himself from a scorpion sting. When he woke up, the scorpion was on a window shade, getting ready to fall on his face. Bob managed to jump out of the way, snap a photo of the venomous creature, before murdering it with his shoe. When Bob told me about the scorpion, I right away messaged my Airbnb host to ask for his advice. "How dangerous is it?" I asked. "No big deal," he replied. "They crawl in sometimes when it's cold or windy outside, but I'm surprised because we fumigate the house." And he promised to send the cleaning lady to fumigate the house again, just in case. It later turned out that there are several varieties of scorpions in Guatemala, and this one was actually the dangerous kind. Its tail and stinger were thicker and larger than its pincers, which means that it relies more on its stinger to kill its prey. I was told that if you get stung by this sort of scorpion, your tongue will go numb and you will not be able to speak for a few days. And that it also brings on a headache and numbness in the spot where the victim was stung. It's a good thing that I didn't know that at the time when we stayed in that house. We spent the day in a nature reserve that had swinging bridges that I was afraid to cross. I mean, who can rely on third world countries not to build something that will collapse? And there were raccoons with long tails there and monkeys, and I was afraid they might attack us, and if they did, where would we get the rabies shots?
You can do it. It's okay, you can do it.
Look, those bananas, I would like some right now.
Alright, go over there and go get them.
No, they're like hanging over the cliff.
Ah.
So close and so far.
So disappointing.
Yeah.
Alright, so you want to get on my shoulders? Now you gonna grab a banana?
Oh my god. What if we were like starving in the forest and we came across that?
Well, we'd have to figure. No, I don't see how you can do it.
You could just come here and you would take the whole entire tree and like move it this way.
Alright, you ready?
I got rice and fish. I served with orange here. You put the orange on the fish. The next morning, after frying some simple pancakes on the gas stove of our cute onion field home, we took a boat to explore the other communities around the famous lake. This lake is surrounded by volcanoes and is itself the crater of a volcano, or so they say. There is no road around Lake Atitlán, or the road isn't safe to drive on, so everyone gets around in small boats with gas-powered engines. We climbed into one such public boat, which cost only $5 or something after dodging some people who were trying to convince us to take a private boat. But the ride turned out to be even more bumpy than our flight into Guatemala City. The lake hardly had any waves, but the boat captain managed to steer the vessel in such a way that the passengers were thrown about up and down and practically hitting their heads on the ceiling. So we are in San Marcos, La Laguna, and we just survived this really scary boat ride. It was going so fast. Maybe the other boats are going at a decent speed. Like, our boat was just way too fast. I thought we were gonna get injured in there. When I climbed out, I asked the young captain how old he was and how long he had been driving a boat. He said he was 18 and had already been a captain for 2 or 3 years. Moral of the story? Avoid boat captains who look like children. After we walked off the boat pier and got ourselves photographed in a group of Mayan women, we overheard a conversation between a group of tourists. They were discussing a guy's girlfriend who had to go to the hospital because she got parasites and was vomiting and had diarrhea all at the same time. I immediately decided that I wouldn't eat anything in San Marcos La Laguna. I just can't stop thinking about those parasites. However, the place was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. We weren't planning to stay for the night, but now we couldn't bring ourselves to leave. We could also just get a place here and come back tomorrow morning.
That's how messy it's gonna cost.
We rented a little rustic house that had 2 floors and windows that opened into a beautiful view of the lake. We walked down the so-called hippie alley, and there were cute cafes and gardens on both sides of it, but I decided that I would not eat or drink anything on account of the parasites. At night, when we returned to our cute dwelling, we were scared to go to sleep because of big spiders that crawled on the walls and the scorpions that we by now found out come out at night. We shook out all our blankets before climbing into our beds. That night, I also convinced myself that I had ear cancer, or rather skin cancer on my ear, because a scab on my ear started bleeding. I would need to get back home as soon as possible to have that looked at.
Africano, clandestino, boliviano, clandestino, mano negra.
The next day I was nauseous at breakfast, although the scab on my ear healed, so worries of skin cancer treatments were replaced by the dread of having to get on another one of those flimsy boats. The lake that morning seemed more choppy than the day before, but we were lucky to get an older captain who apparently wasn't trying to provide his passengers with a free roller coaster ride. And so we landed in San Pedro La Laguna, which has a giant statue of a rooster in front of a church. I don't know the story of St. Peter and what the rooster symbolizes or what role the rooster played in his life, but I did get my photo taken in front of it because I had never seen such a large chicken sculpture before. After that, we stumbled into somebody's funeral. We didn't realize that it was a funeral at first because first I heard firecrackers and fireworks, then a band playing with drums and flutes, then a procession of women who were not young but wore white wedding veils on their heads, and I stood and wondered why everyone had such solemn, unsmiling expressions on their faces. Only when the casket appeared in a cloud of incense with ribbons and men who carried it on their shoulders, they were the most unhappy. Only then did I understand that it was a funeral. This brought, of course, the thought of my own mortality, and I told Bob that I was sure that when I die, there will not be a procession of mourners saying goodbye to me, and the street will not be shut off to traffic, and I will be lucky if someone will bury me at all, because there are many corpses in American morgues that are left completely unclaimed. And sometimes we think that we are lucky to hold American passports, and we look down on people in places like Guatemala who earn less money than we do. But when they die, the whole town turns out to say goodbye, and when we die, then what? On the boat ride back from San Pedro to Panachetel, there was also drama. The overcrowded boat that we were on ran out of gasoline, the engine died in the middle of the lake, and we began bobbling up and down on the waves. I already started imagining the terrible fate that would soon befall us, the thirsty, sunburned, hungry passengers on the overcrowded boat, drifting uncontrollably like the African refugees in the Mediterranean Sea, and blaming myself for not getting off this boat at the last stop. But then the driver took the hose into his mouth and began sucking in gasoline in order to restart the engine. We made it to the dock, although only after inhaling unknown quantities of gasoline fumes, which is a known carcinogen, by the way. And that was our trip to Lake Atitlán, which is a very beautiful lake and not for cowards like me. The only other scary thing that happened to me in Guatemala was the volcanic eruption. There are 3 volcanoes surrounding Antigua. One of them is called Fuego, fire, another is called Agua, water, and a third is called something else, a Mayan word that I don't remember. Fuego is one of the most active volcanoes in the Americas or in the world, and it apparently erupts every 15 minutes or something. Most tourists actually come to Antigua to climb up to Fuego or the neighboring volcano to get a closer look at the eruptions. Of course, I am the biggest coward you ever met, and there was no way I was going to hike up an active volcano, especially after hearing from more than one person that it's quite a challenging hike, and watching a YouTube video about some tourists who had, quote, the scariest experience of their lives and almost died on this volcano hike. Even the rabbi of the local Chabad house could not convince me to go up there on his all-terrain, all-drive vehicle. Nope, let other brave souls climb on top of the active volcanoes. I was scared enough of the volcano from the window of my gated community in Antigua, because one day during my 2-month stay, Fuego decided to erupt. I'm not totally sure what this means because it erupts every 15 minutes anyway, but this must have been a different sort of eruption because the blue sky disappeared from Antigua and something like a white fog settled in. But it wasn't an ordinary fog. There was, I noticed, a slight smell of smoke in the air, and when I looked out of the window a few times, I saw something that looked like snowflakes falling slowly from the sky. They weren't snowflakes, it was ash. I was talking to my mom just then, on the phone, of course, and she suddenly became worried about the gases from the volcano, which she said were not safe to breathe in, so I immediately closed all windows and doors and made sure to always wear my face mask outside, not only for COVID, but now to filter out the volcano's gases. I promptly consulted Google and my landlord, wondering if it was still safe to remain in Antigua. He assured me that Pompeii was actually much closer to Vesuvius than Antigua is to Fuego, and so we had nothing to fear. Only the villages on the slope of Fuego were evacuated. Well, actually, I just looked it up. Pompeii is 9 kilometers away from Vesuvius, and Antigua is 16 from Fuego. Are 7 kilometers really keeping us that much safer? In the last 500 years, Antigua was never affected by the eruption, said my landlord. To be perfectly honest, Fuego had never destroyed Antigua with its lava and ashes. But the nearby Agua volcano, which is dormant, caused a big problem one day when a lake in its crater overflowed and buried the city in an avalanche of muddy water. So to summarize, let's be honest, I was constantly afraid of something. When I was out, I was scared of taking the Uber home. Was the driver going to kidnap me? Was he going to get lost? Was he going to crash? Was he going to flirt with me or hit on me? When I was home in bed, I was listening for the footsteps of strangers breaking in and the tremors of another earthquake which could be starting at any moment. When I finally got into my flight back to the USA, I switched with my neighbor for an aisle seat and avoided looking out of the window as the machine built by humans defied the force of gravity and somehow maneuvered itself around mountains. We did not crash.
And here is Julie crossing the bridge of death here. Yeah, but you did it. How about that, huh? See? Doing something you didn't expect you'd be able to do. Congratulations. Come here, come here, come here. High five.
Oh shit, there's one more.